Hello, I am Kamiko Sanders, and welcome to Community Chat with TEO. Thank you for joining the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated Tau Epsilon Omega chapter as we encourage you and our community leaders in more ways to be involved and engaged in our communities and the political process. Today, I would like to introduce to you Allyson Richardson. Allyson is a native of Atlanta, Georgia, and is the product of Atlanta and Fulton County Public School System. She began her college career, at Clark Atlanta University as a business administration major. However, after the tragic death of her mother during the second semester of her sophomore year, she and her father, Larry Irvin, made a new life for themselves in Austin, Texas, as he accepted a new position at Houston-Tillotson University. She decided to transfer there as she and her father adapted to the loss of her beloved mother and wife of her father, Mrs. Valerie Johnson Irving. Upon her arrival, she immediately met the late Ozzie Taylor Morton, the first African American and female to serve as Treasurer of the United States of America. Ms. Morton influenced and impacted Allyson and led her to dedicate her life to public service and return to Clark Atlanta University to pursue her master's degree in public administration. Mrs. Richardson served as Assistant Deputy Commissioner with the Division of Secure Campuses overseeing the administration and functions of human resources and budgeting for the youth in the state of Georgia's custody. Currently, Allyson is the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Administrative Services, which is responsible for engineering, information technology, property management, fleet operations, real estate, building services, project management, and the Office of Grants for the Department of Juvenile Justice. As Mrs. Richardson continues to pursue her passions for public service and politics, she enjoys several other pastimes, including traveling with her husband, Michael, participating in mission trips, spending time with her two young, adorable children, Irvin and Lauren, and volunteering at their school and church. You are a very, very busy woman, Allyson. Thank you so much for joining myself and the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Tau Epsilon Omega chapter as we galvanize our communities to be involved, to be engaged, and to vote, not just for the presidential elections, but beyond. So as stated previously, you are the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Administrative Services for the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. A lot of people might not connect that to voting, but tell me from your perspective, why is it important to vote? And why should it be important to our fellow community members with respect to the juvenile justice system?
So typically, what I've noticed in our community, the African-American community, that we really get motivated to vote when it's a presidential election. And we see long lines and we see constant communication going back and forth up until November, so you can know who to vote for. But it is just important, if not more important, to vote in your local elections because they control the things that are happening immediately around your surroundings, especially as it relates to justice, juvenile justice, or criminal justice as a whole. We're living in a time where we're constantly hearing Black Lives Matter. We're hearing about a young man getting shot, not being dealt with professionally by the police, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's the height of everything that we see in today's time. But those things can be controlled by who you vote for. We vote for the sheriff. We vote for the person who selects the chief of police. We vote for the governor. The governor is the one who selects the commissioners and the leaders for all the agencies that run the state of Georgia. And in the case of a city or a county, we elect the county manager or the mayor, and they're selecting the police chief or whoever is running the justice programs in your community. So it's very important to make sure that you go out, you vote, and you vote on the issues that matter to you. And I always recommend that people select kind of like their top 3 things that matter most to them. Sometimes it's education, sometimes it's criminal justice, sometimes that's infrastructure, sometimes that's finances. So whatever is close to your heart, you need to select those 3. I would think that criminal justice is high on most people's priority list just because of what's going on in our communities today. So once you select your top 3, then it's your responsibility to get focused. What do you want to see? Do you want to see fairness in the court systems? Do you want to see programs that prevent your kids from getting into gangs from the beginning? Do you want to see human trafficking stop? What do you want to care about? What is important to you? And then once you decide that and do your research, then you should align your candidates with your ideals and your values. And because no candidate is going to be perfect, no candidate is going to align with everything that's a priority for you. And so that's why it's important to pick your top 3. And just given where we are today in our society, I find that criminal justice is a top priority for most people in the African American community.
Okay, good to know. I mean, I think that is a very good strategy, picking your top 3, maybe even your top 5, depending on where you are, and being educated about it. Of course, we don't want to see our kids end up in the juvenile justice system. However, if they do, it sounds like from what you're saying, understanding your candidates and elected officials' platforms, no matter the party, frankly,
No matter the party.
Is really important. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So I've been in the criminal justice system for nearly 15 years. So I've worked under Democratic leadership and Republican leadership, and both leaderships have aligned with my values at some point in time. And so it's very important to do your research. I know that typically people like to vote straight Democratic down the ballot or straight Republican, but that's not always true. That's why it's important to do your research, because you might find that a candidate on the opposite side of what you believe might align with whatever your top 3 or your top 5 might be. And so what we find now, especially with a previous administration for the state of Georgia, is that we are in the middle of criminal justice reform. And what that means is that we try not to send our youth to prison unless it's something very serious like murder, sexual assault, these things. But before criminal justice reform, we were sending youth to jail for skipping school, for petty weed crimes, just not really for things that youth need to be in prison for. Because what you find out is once you go into the criminal justice system and you are behind the wire, you're with some of the worst of the worst. And typically you end up coming out worse than when you went in, because if you weren't in a gang, now you're surrounded by gang members. Now you're surrounded by all the horrible crimes that you see on the news every morning, especially in the city of Atlanta.
Right.
And so what criminal justice reform did is separated the worst of the worst from the people who are just kind of straddling the fence. And therefore, the option, and it has been working so far, is that you do programs that are in the community, programs for after school program, even some residential programs to make sure you're getting mental health services, to make sure you're getting substance abuse assistance, because sometimes you're making bad decisions because you yourself are on drugs or your parents are on drugs, and you need the counseling to get out of that. And so therefore, that particular administration that brought in criminal justice reform to the state of Georgia was a Republican candidate. And so it's important to know what they're doing as well as Democrats. But that doesn't mean that Democrats aren't doing their thing too. Another topic that is really hot, pretty much you hear it in the news every other day, is human trafficking. Because of Hartsfield Airport, we are the hub for human trafficking, and our girls and boys are being trafficked all across the United States, but it's starting right here in Georgia. And so we also have Republican administrations that have taken really to heart that issue, and they've been implementing programs after programs to prevent it, and not only to prevent it, to keep the youth that are getting rescued from these situations from being behind the wire themselves. Because previously, once they got arrested because it was considered prostitution or whatever, they would be behind the wire, get arrested, and then their record would be real horrible, because you don't want a record for 14 because you were human trafficked.
Right.
So now when you're rescued, then you go to a receiving center, you can receive wraparound services to make sure you're not treated as a criminal, but instead as a victim, because that's exactly what has happened in your situation. So that's why it's important to really know what's important to you, because if you have a niece or a nephew or a cousin or anybody that's been human trafficked in your family, that might be something that's very important to you. So you need to make sure that you're aligned with those type of values with the people that you're voting for. But if you're worried about, your community where you see the young boys selling water on the street and you don't want them to get arrested for something silly and then tarnish their records for the rest of their life, then you might be more interested in criminal justice reform, because you don't want that person who's out there trying to sell water on the street just to make a dollar honestly to end up behind the wire with gang members who are literally taking people's lives and don't value life, and doing the more harmful crimes that you don't want to be associated with.
Very, very, very great points. So if you can speak a little bit more to, I know you and I understand it, but being behind the wire.
Yes, I always say that, I guess just from working in the field so much, but I do understand that people don't know that. So behind the wire to me is just being in a secure campus. So technically, when you're dealing with juveniles, there are no jails and no prisons. I use that term just so people can understand the terminology, because that's what people can relate to. But there are regional youth campuses, and then there are youth developmental campuses. And so a regional youth developmental campus is a jail. And so that means you're being housed until you can get in front of a judge and be sentenced for your crime, whether it be found guilty or innocent. That's when you're in an RYDC. But if you're in a YDC, a youth development campus, that means you have already gone to a judge, you have been sentenced, and you have time to serve, and you're guilty of your crime. And so in both cases, I call them behind the wire, because you're in a secure campus. It's very similar to a prison, but you have a lot of services, whether you're in an RY and a YDC. You're getting education, mental health, medical services. You're getting a lot of programming. You get any religious beliefs you might have, you're getting service for those. It's a truly a rehabilitative type environment to make sure that when you're released, that you're better than when you came in.
Okay. So one of the things that we like to focus on is, you got this person elected. Now, how do you continue to stay involved and engaged? So from the juvenile justice perspective, if there's a candidate, and guess what? Maybe he's not the candidate that I voted for, but this is still important to me. And maybe this isn't something that is a part of their platform. How would a regular person go about being engaged with their local and state officials to get programs implemented or to push them towards understanding, like human trafficking has become a bigger, more important issue in the eyes of the law, and how things have changed? How would one try to help move that agenda forward?
So most candidates these days actually have some type of initiative to engage the citizens in their community. And so the first thing you need to do is reach out to your elected official, especially on your local level. I know for the city of East Point, I've reached out to my mayor And therefore, as a result of reaching out to her, I've been able to be in meetings with her to tell her what my concerns and priorities are. And she knows what my skill sets are. So if she needs something, she knows that she can reach out to me to give her assistance in any way that she needs. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it also goes back to research, because your local elected officials can't do everything. And I guarantee you there's somebody in your community already doing something that aligns with your values, whether it's a sorority or fraternity, or whether it's an after school program, or whether it's a church, or whatever it may be. There is somebody, I guarantee you, already doing what you want to do. So you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. You just need to go and volunteer your time, services, and skills, because they still do need help. Most of the time, these organizations are nonprofits, but I know like there's some that come to mind, like Raising Expectations. They've been in the community down by the Mercedes-Benz stadiums for probably like 15, 20 years now. And they're trying to help the youth and get them on the front end instead of allowing them to have to integrate the criminal justice system. So you have organizations like that. And then you have all kind of churches, whether it's Impact United Methodist Church or Tri-Cities Church or Elizabeth Baptist, who are feeding the homeless, have after school programs, have schools, some have criminal justice. I know at Ben Hill United Methodist Church, they have criminal justice programs to educate you about the law, to have dialogue with the police in your community and those things like that. So you can start by reaching out to your local officials, but you also need to do the research to determine who is doing the work in your community and go and volunteer. It is not okay to say, I want this, I want that, and never put in the work. We are the community. We have to hold people accountable. We have to volunteer. We are educated, smart, a bright group of people who have all the capacity in the world to make a difference. But that means we have to get up, we got to get out, we got to make it work. Because even one youth, if you just volunteer and help one youth, that's one youth that you can keep from going behind the wire. Because sometimes it's too late once they get behind the wire. So we really need to be catching the youth ahead of time.
Yeah, I always say that voting is the least that you can do.
It's the least that you can do.
It's the least that you can do. I fully embrace, there's a lot going on in our world right now, and everyone has something to say. But I say, you have this complaint. The elected officials cannot do it all. They are only as strong as their electorate. So what are you doing? You may not want to run for office. You may not want to work in an official capacity in politics, but you can volunteer. You can put your money where your mouth is. You can get out there and pass out pamphlets or whatever it is. Put yourself, your time, your efforts, your money behind someone who's doing the work that you think is important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Allyson, I just have to say this was a great conversation. I really, really hope that our fellow community members got a lot out of this. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I would just kind of echo what you just said, that voting is really the very minimum you can do. Even to go to the point of knocking on doors to help get your elected official that your values align with elected. That's very important. It's not just enough, in my opinion, to write a check to help a campaign. People need you to work on their behalf, and they can't knock on every door themselves. They can't make every call themselves. So you got to go and put in the work if you want to see a difference. We have the ability, if we can rally everybody together, to get people in office that align with our values to make a difference in this world. And then just the final thing, go volunteer. It's very important. Even if it's just one thing that you do, that's one thing that helps. So you can go play basketball with the youth at the rec center in your neighborhood. You can go to the YMCA. You can go to any after school program and help tutor, because a lot of times kids also get discouraged because they're falling behind in school and their parents can't help them. So if you could just find one way to give back to prevent somebody from even having to engage in the criminal justice system, even if it's one simple webinar of how you interact with the police, or anything, is very important to help turn the tide in the world that we see today.
Well, thank you again, Assistant Deputy Commissioner Allyson Richardson, for joining me along with the ladies of TEO for some community chat where we serve the communities of College Park and East Point, Georgia. Please remember, early voting has already started in Georgia for our second elections. If you haven't voted, please make a plan to vote. We hope that we've inspired a few more ways for you to become more involved and engaged in our communities and the political process. Until next time, take care, be safe, wear your mask, and of course, vote.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.